Hi there, my name is Renee Wolf. I'm the current Freeland Middle School Principal and Director of School Improvement for the secondary level. I've been working closely with Dawn Shea on shifts to standards-based grading practices in a traditional setting, and she asked that I just talk about my journey with shifting to standards-based practices as an educator, specifically from the point of view of a history and English teacher. So when I really think about introducing you to my journey with standards-based practices, it began with an administrator challenging me on what a grade represents and what does a grade really mean. And we had some discussion around two things, and that is that a grade needs to represent clear communication of what students are learning, and also a grade needs to separate behavior and academic, that you really can't have those two pieces tied into one grade. And so from there, I began the process of really thinking about what that would look like in my classroom, and I started with separating behavior and academic. It felt like something that was doable for me, and so I started to think about how to do that. And so what I did is I committed to my year one process of standards-based practices and separated all academic and behavior work. So the only thing that actually went into my grade book was anything that assessed student learnings towards mastery of a standard. Anything else went away. So I didn't grade late work anymore. I didn't grade missing work. Nothing went in as a 0 because that deflates a grade significantly. And then I also got rid of any extra credit I had previously done. All of those things either inflate or deflate a grade, and really were more behavioral components that I needed to address than academic components I needed to address. However, that left me to try and figure out how to deal with those behaviors. I still had kids turning in things late, so how am I going to address that? So what I ended up doing is I ended up developing some opportunity cost pieces. This was kind of my next step in the journey, was to develop the opportunity cost. I ended up developing a test retake form for my English and history classes, where students had to go through specific steps to be able to retake or redo a test or assignment. I also ended up developing a social responsibility rubric that laid out 4 expectations for behavior in my classroom. Additionally, we did develop some norms in class, where we developed what I called in my history class as the classroom constitution. So each class came together, developed their class constitution of what they were going to commit to, and this was all based on our building-wide theme of positive behavior supports: be respectful, be safe, be responsible. So everything in my class had a clear purpose for how we were going to behave, and then I held students accountable through self-assessment on the social responsibility rubric, as well as my own assessment and conferencing with students, both individually and at parent-teacher conferences. From here, I really began to change my classroom setting. When you dive into the world of standards-based grading, you don't just dive into the grading practices, it also completely shifts your instructional practices. And my room became much more diversified because I realized that all my students were independent learners. And so I began differentiating more, and differentiating actually made sense for the first time, because before I'd always try and differentiate instruction, but then I'm trying to grade and assess in a certain way that didn't fit the mold of differentiation. So from there, as far as grading and instruction, it just looked completely different. It was much more independent and tailored to the student. And then I was always going towards that mastery element. So the mastery of the standards was the only thing that ended up in my grade book, and my practices in the classroom reflected that. Overall, that was my beginning of my journey in standards-based grading. It really focused in on that piece of what does a grade represent? It is to communicate what students have learned and how they've mastered the standards. And then I also kind of dove in by separating behavior and academic, because that was the most doable component for me. Thanks.